into now is helping you understand. We're going to go back a little bit and go into more of a deep dive into mindset. When we learn about mindset, most of the time we're not given the full picture of mindset around how it's formed and the role it really does play. So what we're about to do is go deeper on that. So mindset is a number of things. It's the assumptions that you have about the world. We assume certain things based on our experience. It's our beliefs about the world as well, what we believe to be a certain way. Our mindset also incorporates our practices or our actions, because when you understand how the mind works, you're going to see that what we do is a result of how we think. So mindset isn't just what we think, it's what we think, how we feel, and what we do. It's your point of view and how you view the world and the judgments you make on other people. And you probably would know this as unconscious bias. You know, we have a program running in the background of our life. It's running unconsciously, meaning without our awareness, at a subconscious level, so at a very deeper level. And believe it or not, your mindset creates your results. It determines your results. It determines how you see the world. It determines whether you see opportunities in change and uncertainty, or whether you see fear and anxiety in change and uncertainty. So mindset is a big player when we're looking at helping people manage people through change and uncertainty. What I want to do is help you all here as individuals to understand this from your point of view, so then you can overlay it in the context of the people you work with or any team members you may be managing. So let's have a look at how mindsets are formed. So mindset isn't formed and doesn't just stop forming. It's continually being formed. Although science is saying that by the age of 34, most of our life is running on a subconscious program. So we're just running on habitual behaviors, but it can change. We know that through Carol Dweck's work that, you know, we can change our mindset. So we start with early childhood, and we look at early childhood as being from the moment of conception up until you're round about 7 or 8 years of age. So some of you may have heard this before, which is great. So what happens here is you are predominantly at this age sort of living your life in what we call a theta brainwave. So it's a lower, slower frequency. And as I said earlier, you know, as adults, we don't learn through osmosis, but as children, we do. So osmosis is when we just absorb without any action information from our environment around us. So what's happening at this stage, now any of you that have children that are under 8, pay attention. So what happens at this age is our minds and our brains are functioning, as I said, at that theta brainwave level. Now, if I was a hypnotherapist and you came to me and wanted me to help you change something that's in the subconscious mind, my main aim would be to put you into theta brainwave. Why? Because that is where the brain and the subconscious mind is open to suggestion. So if you think about that in early childhood, a child spends 80 to 90% of its time in theta brainwave. This means it's taking on information and taking on without judgment anything that's happening in the world around them. So they look to the world, our parents, teachers, society, media, all of these influences from the external environment are filtering through without any judgment straight into the subconscious mind and starting to formulate the beliefs and the assumptions about the world. And if we don't check those and change those, we take them into our adulthood and they become the lens we see the world through. So early childhood, this is where the majority of a person's mindset is formed. look at this from the context of people that may be in your environment that you're leading or managing. If you are managing a team, think of the cultures they may have been brought up in. Think of the area or where they may have been brought up in. Think of the time in history when they may have been born. All of these things have an impact, and it will also impact how they manage and how they respond or react to change. So you can't go to one team or a great big team and just have one size fits all for change. Now, this is where it becomes quite complex. It's how do I have an approach that can help everyone, because everyone's going to come with their own mindset. Then we move on into adolescence. So this is when we start to, and we sort of touched on adolescence earlier when we were going through the stages of adult development. So adolescence is we're starting to get a sense of ourself, and we're starting to see our own importance, and we're starting to push back a little bit. And what's happening here as well at a deeper level, our brain is moving from more being in the theta, suggestible, to starting to move up into the alpha and the beta. So alpha is daydreaming and beta is analytical and thinking. So now we're starting to think for ourselves, we're starting to question things, we're starting to get a sense of self. And these things are now also starting to filter through and become who we are, starting to form the mindset, starting to form the way we view the world. And then we move into adulthood. And this is where our mindsets still can be changed. Okay, so as an adult, it just becomes slightly harder because we've got all these ingrained beliefs, but from an adult's point of view, our mindset is still forming, especially if we're in that conformist mindset that we were talking about earlier, that the conformist mind. When we're at that level, we're taking on what everyone else is doing and saying and forming that as part of who we are, part of our identity, unless we're starting to move into the self-authoring and the self-transforming mind. So we still do adopt and take on practices from the external environment. Now, it's a little bit different as an adult. We take on influences from our workplace, from our boss, sometimes from politicians, celebrities, people of authority such as doctors and lecturers and people that we think are potentially better than us. And sometimes we start to adopt their way of being, and that changes our mindset. Sometimes we do it consciously, meaning we choose to do it. Sometimes we do it unconsciously, meaning it just happens and we aren't actually deliberately making the choice to change. We're just changing to fit in. So that's how our mindsets are formed. But one of the things that people don't really have a grasp on, that I'm noticing with the work that I do, is people don't understand how, now that we've got the mindset, we know how it's formed over a period of time, how does it actually work? So how is this working and operating in my life? So I'm going to walk you through a model to help you understand this. Now, this is a collection, like the earlier model I walked you through, which was the stages of adult development, came from a lot of multiple sources of my research. This also comes from multiple sources. It comes from neuroscience, neurobiology, psychology, work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Thurman Fleet, Eric Kandel, who is a neurobiologist, and also some of the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. So it's all sort of all these different fields, bringing together all the different ideas and putting them into a framework so you can better understand how your mind works. So in this image that you can see on the screen, I'm going to ask you to allow the larger cog to represent your mind. And the smaller cog, which looks like a head, is going to be your brain and your body. Okay, so that's kind of what it's going to represent as we move through how this works. So the first thing is we're going to sort of divide the mind into 3 areas so we can understand the different types of, the different functions of the mind. Now, depending on which sort of level or avenue you take to understand how the mind, things may have different labels, but I'm just going to use some labels to help you understand how the mind functions. You'll find this really helpful when, first of all, why we see things as being uncertain and why we can resist change. This will help you understand what's going on at a deeper level for people around you and yourself. Why you may be struggling or why people may be struggling. So we'll start off with the top part. This is, excuse me, this is going to represent your conscious part of your mind. So consciousness is, you know, this is where we think. Conscious, when we're conscious, we're awake. We know what's going on at the conscious part of the mind. Then the middle part is going to represent our analytical mind. So this is where we analyze things. And then the bottom part, the larger portion, is going to represent our subconscious mind. So let's have a look at each of these. So you are constantly moving around the world in this amazing big pool of data. Constantly information is coming to you through your 5 senses. So right now you're hearing, you're seeing, if you're sitting on a seat, you're feeling. There's a lot of things going on. So we constantly get information. When information comes to us, the first filtering point is our conscious mind. So our conscious mind gets that. Sometimes we don't even realize it's there. It goes straight through the conscious and into the subconscious. So let's just have a look at what happens. So information comes in and it hits the conscious mind. This is where we think. The conscious mind is where you do all your thinking. This is where you do your reasoning. This is where you use your imagination. There's a lot of tools that we have in the conscious mind. In fact, it's a really great part of us because it does have the ability for us to use our free will as well. It's part of our conscious faculty. So we use our conscious mind for knowledge acquisition. So right now, your brain will be in beta brainwave and you will be taking on information. This is also where you make your choices and your decisions. This is where what we'd call, as I said earlier, your free will is. Your conscious mind operates through your memory, through the past, so bringing up memories, and it'll create information and ideas from the past. And it also uses your imagination to predict the future. So it doesn't predict in a psychic way, it predicts based on pattern recognition. If this happened in the past, then this may happen in the future, and also uses your imagination to dream, to come up with goals and visions. This all happens at a conscious level. The analytical mind is slightly different. So the analytical mind, it actually measures what you know. So it thinks about what I know at a conscious level against what I don't know. So it goes, if I'm getting this information right now from Georgia, I'm now measuring that and weighing it up against the information I've been given in the past, what I already know. Does this make sense? Or is Georgia full of, you know, she's just, you know, full of crap, right? So it's measuring that up now. It's starting to go, okay, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? It's analyzing. This is also the place that draws conclusions for you. So right now it's going to be saying, oh, this information from Georgia, yeah, this sort of fits in with what I've heard in the past. And now I'm going to draw a conclusion that this makes sense, or this doesn't make sense. I need to ask a question to get clarification. The analytical mind also thinks in the box. Okay, so it doesn't come up with ideas. That's the conscious mind. It thinks within the box, and its role is for your safety and protection. So what it does, if new information comes in, so I want you to think of this in relation to, or in the context of, change or uncertainty. Your analytical mind gets information about something that's going to change, that is different. The first thing it does is it searches your subconscious mind to look for an existing program. It searches your deep memory to look for a memory. It searches through to find if there's anything familiar that matches it. It looks for evidence. And if it doesn't find it, it'll start making you feel a little odd, creating self-doubt, resistance. This is not safe. It's different from what I've experienced. So now what it does, it starts to put the brakes on, and it reinforces your programming at a subconscious level, whether that programming serves you or not. It will continually reinforce it. So let's have a look at the subconscious mind. So this is where the majority of your mindset is. Now, you have what we call programming. We use the term programming in the subconscious mind. Now, this here is, it stores everything from the past, all your belief systems, and these are either going to be good, positive, or bad, negative. And you get to judge whether they're good or bad based on whether they serve you or not. Okay, so some people might have belief systems that you don't agree with, but they work really well for them. So that's okay. So your mindset at a subconscious level is the assumptions that you've made. It's the beliefs that you hold about the world. And most importantly, the beliefs you hold about yourself. It's also where your habits are. So what generally will happen is your brain, how habits are formed is your brain will notice that you're doing something once. That's interesting. You do something twice, it starts to go, that's really interesting. You've done that twice now. Then you do it 3 or 4 times and it starts to pay attention and notices the pattern, and it goes, okay, you're doing this a lot. It must be important. So I'm going to store this as a deep memory in the subconscious mind, so you don't have to think about doing it anymore, and it becomes a habit. So we all have habits, good and bad. It's just your brain's way of acting efficiently, going, oh, you don't have to worry, you don't have to think about this anymore. And that's why sometimes it's hard to change, because we have these deep ingrained habits that we've formed over time that the brain thought was important, and we're going to have to change them. It also is where your values lie. Now, a lot of people do personality tests and values tests. They're all great edutainment, meaning they're educational and entertaining, but they are not fixed. If you really subscribe to the growth mindset, your values and your strengths will always change. You get to choose if you want to change them or not. This is also where you store your emotional reactions. So these are the things that happen. So if something happens and you feel a certain way, you'll have certain actions. So let's say we're driving down the road and a car cuts us off. You will have a pre-programmed emotional reaction for that situation. The environment triggers something within you and the emotional reaction responds. There are stored programs. You have an argument with a boss or a family member, it will run the stored program. So this is why behavior is hard to change, because at a subconscious level, it can change, but you've got to know how to change it. This subconscious mind forms your perceptions and the lens that you see the world through. The difference between your subconscious mind and your conscious mind is pretty radical, actually. Your conscious mind has choice. It can choose. You can choose whether you're going to eat a certain thing or what you're going to do, whether you're going to put your camera on or not put your camera on, or get on, write in the chat. You get to choose those things today. But the subconscious mind, where all of those programs run, doesn't have a choice. It must accept anything that is given to it. Anything that comes through from the analytical mind lets through, the subconscious mind just accepts it. At a conscious level, you can choose not to accept something. You can sit here and go, oh, I don't accept what George is saying right now, and you don't believe it, so therefore you're batting that away. You're flicking that away back to where it came from. However, if your conscious mind has another sort of attention on something else, your subconscious mind will be wide open and things will go through and it can't reject it. So for instance, if you're feeling a lot of anxiety at the moment and you're constantly having the news on in the background and you think that it's not affecting you because you're cooking dinner or you're doing something else or you're working on your computer, what's happening is your ability to think and to analyze whether that information is true or not is switched off. It's focused on something else. So the guard is busy. And so all the information goes through and the subconscious mind accepts it and stores it through repetition. When we spoke about the conscious mind operates generally in the future and the past. The subconscious mind constantly operates in the present moment. What this means is, if I am thinking right now about a change that's going to happen, and I use my imagination and I project myself into this world of uncertainty, my subconscious mind is going to think it's happening now. If I use my conscious mind and take myself back to the past and remember a good event, my subconscious mind is going to think that it's happening now, and it's going to remember that, and it's going to feel like it did when that good event happened. I can also take my subconscious mind back to the past for a bad event, and I can recall that using my conscious mind, and my subconscious mind right now will feel exactly like it did 10, 15 years ago. So it thinks, or it feels like everything is happening now. So this is why it's really important when we're starting to navigate uncertainty and change, is to paint a picture of the future that has a vision worth moving towards, because then the subconscious mind will start to get emotionally involved with it. Now, remember we talked earlier about having an emotional connection to change? This is one of the reasons why it's really important to do that. Another reason is why it's important is your conscious mind and your analytical mind combined, they control 5% of what you do. 5% of your reality is defined by what you do at a conscious level. That leaves a whopping 95% that is controlled by the subconscious mind. Why is this important when we're starting to move towards change and manage uncertainty? Because what happens is, if I have a vision and a goal I'm wanting to move towards personally or take my team towards, this goal and this vision has come from a conscious construct. It's come from my imagination, it's come from my thinking, and I've pulled together this amazing goal. That on its own has 5% power. That means if I want to make the change, I'm probably going to have to use willpower to make it happen. 5% willpower. If, however, I have an emotional attachment to it and I have some beliefs and values and existing behaviors already aligned to that goal or that vision, I have 95% power working with me. So what we want to do is ensure that we've got the subconscious mind on the team. We want to make sure that the person or the people that are changing have the belief systems and the mindset aligned to where we're going. And we do that because the language of the subconscious mind, as you can see on the screen, is feelings, which are emotions. How do we get our people emotionally attached to where we want them to go, to the goal? And that is aligning it to their values. that is building a vision that they see themselves, they can imagine themselves doing, and they feel excited by it, not scared by it. So I remember when this was first, or this, a similar model to this was first shown to me over 20 years ago. And I used this model to navigate my career, to navigate role changes, to navigate starting my own business, because I knew if I aligned the subconscious mind to where I wanted to go, my body, which is controlled by the subconscious mind, it's in every cell of our body, would naturally take action. So instead of me forcing myself to take the actions, I did a lot of mind work first, as in I started to change the programs. And the way we change the subconscious mind is through repetition. And I don't know if I've got on this slide, I don't, is through repetition and emotional impact. So there's two ways you can help change someone's behaviors. And this, Stephen, goes to your question earlier, how do we change people's mindsets? So one is through repetition. We can choose to repetitiously do the new behavior or think the new thought or have the new feeling over and over and over again until it becomes subconscious and it becomes natural. Or we can create an emotional attachment to it. So an emotional impact is when something happens that makes you change. I'll give you an example, a personal example, so you can really understand how we change through the emotional impact, and then you'll understand how potentially you have changed, good or bad, based on an emotional impact. So if we think about, if I rewind back to December the 27th, 2016. Now, because I can remember the date, means it must have been an emotional impact. Whatever happened had such an emotional impact on me. So before this particular date, this is an interesting example. It's a personal one. I had been thinking about doing yoga, starting yoga, a yoga practice. And what I'd done was every now and then I would go to a yoga studio and do yoga, maybe once every 3 months. I wasn't practicing yoga. I was dabbling in yoga, not even dabbling. And then whenever someone would say to me, George, I hear you want to do yoga, there's this nice studio near you, I'd always come up with excuses. Now, the excuses were, it's not a good enough place, it's too far, all these excuses. So what generally happens is justifications and excuses are driven by a misalignment between my belief about myself and my goal. So I didn't believe I was a yoga person, so therefore I was never going to do it. However, on December the 27th, 2016, I was walking through Bunnings in Eltham with my mother. And we were walking along and she had her shopping trolley, you know, the big Bunnings trolleys. She had one of those trolleys and it was full. And I said, Mum, here, let me push the trolley for you. And she looked at me and she said, oh no, I need it to help me, to hold me up. And I went, when did that happen? When did my mum need a shopping trolley to help her be stable on her feet? Now, it was that instance right there, that moment. So Stephen, to your point earlier, the power of moments, it was that moment when I saw my future. I saw that if I didn't do something today that my future self would thank me for, I was going to end up needing something to hold me up when I was shopping. And I didn't like that vision. And I thought, I need to do something to make sure that I have flexibility and balance in my old age. What can I do? So all the years leading up to that, when I had excuses and justifications for not doing yoga, that night I downloaded a yoga app. And I've been doing yoga in this office on the floor 4 to 5 times a week ever since. That is an emotional impact. It creates change like that. Now, Stephen, to your question earlier, how do we create those for those people? That's creating a vision that people are emotionally involved in. They become emotionally involved if they're part of creating the vision. They also become emotionally involved if it's aligned to their values and their needs. And sometimes that's the journey in itself to be able to establish that with those people who find it hard to change. So that's a whole nother conversation. So back to how the mind works. I hope that was helpful for those in relation to what an emotional impact was. So back to how our mind works. So our brain and our body gets all of its information from the mind, and we then take action and speak based on what the message is coming through, based on the program. 95% of what we do every day, we're doing from a subconscious program. We're doing it through routine and habit. 5% we're consciously doing, and that's when there's something different. And then this obviously creates our personal reality. It creates how we view the world. So if you're wanting to make a change personally or at a bigger level, the conscious mind where we give all that information to is not where the change happens. And we spend so much time communicating about change and telling people all these things they need to do, yet we want them to take new actions, and they're only going to act based on anything they're emotionally involved in, anything that's in the subconscious mind. Otherwise, they're going to put up resistance. So for us to help people change, we have to start looking at the subconscious mind to help them move through, to make things that used to feel uncertain, to make them feel certain. I want to touch on now something that I mentioned a little earlier, which was actually, before I do, does anyone have any questions up until this point?
Georgia, Stephen
Yes.
here. Thanks. I like your personal story. I have same story, one for myself. But the subconscious, judgmental, is it falls under your subconscious or your conscious when you are very judgmental on somebody?
Okay, so when we judge somebody, where does that come from?
Yes.
Yep, that comes from the subconscious. Majority of the time, what we're doing when we're judging somebody is we are seeing them through the lens of our mindset. We are seeing them through what we think is right from our life and what all of our beliefs we have about the world. We are now judging them because they're at odds of what we believe. So it comes from that judgment is an unconscious biased judgment coming from the subconscious mind, the program. So you will have a belief system about, or the person will have a belief system around how a certain person needs to act, how a person needs to be, what they need to say. And now we judge them on that. And that's all stored at a subconscious level, unless we change it. So what I'm going to do now is move forward and help you understand some of these protective mechanisms that we have that actually stop us from changing. They're protecting us, but we don't think they're protecting us. It's making it really hard for change. So let's have a look at how these work. Okay, so we're going to do this in still using the context of the mind and how the mind works. So first of all, you've got your analytical mind. And if you want to understand more around how this works, there's a great book by Robert Keegan and Lisa Lesko-Leahy called Immunity to Change. So you have your analytical mind, which tries to protect you. And what this does is it's our immunity to change, and it acts like a guard, and it stops us from looking stupid. So the analytical mind is really there to protect us, as I was saying, and it scans the subconscious mind looking for evidence. And if it doesn't have evidence that we've done something before, or that we've experienced something and we can't validate it, it'll put on the brakes and create self-doubt. It doesn't want you looking stupid, basically. It's a protective mechanism, and it's a beautiful protective mechanism, but most of the time it stops us moving forward. It's what we'd probably call the imposter syndrome. That's what it would be. Then there's, at a subconscious level, there's a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. Now, this was written quite a long time ago, and it's by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. So what happens is he describes in here how over time we build this amazing protective mechanism that acts like an autopilot. So I want you to think about an autopilot on an aeroplane or a thermostat in your air conditioner or heater. So what happens is you have a set point. If we veer off that set point, so I've got my autopilot saying I'm going to go to Brisbane, and as I'm flying to Brisbane, I start, you know, a bit of turbulence comes along and it knocks me off my center. The autopilot brings you back on to where you need to go, back to your destination. So his findings discovered that we have a self-image, a belief about ourselves that becomes our set point. And when we start to knock ourselves off, our self-image will bring us back again. So this again prevents change. We start to self-sabotage to bring ourselves back to our set point. So this could happen if we experience something really good that's outside of what we believe we're worth, we'll bring ourselves back. If we experience something that is, I'll use the term bad, we go off on something negative, the set point go, no, that's not right, and it'll bring us back again. And you see this happening with income, you see this happening with weight, you see this happening with a lot of things where people just keep going back to their self-belief, and it's a subconscious thing. The cybernetic system, which is that autopilot, it protects you and keeps you aligned to what you believe about yourself and what you believe you're worth. So a lot of people will continually earn the same amount of money and continually do the same sort of things because it's the autopilot. It's the temperature they've set on their thermostat. And they'll, you know, the door will open, a cool breeze will come in, and it'll go, no, we need to put the heater on. So it brings you back to the set point, the temperature of your life. Same thing happens on, so I bought a new car, not a Tesla, I wish, a couple of years ago, and it had the lane detector, automatic lane detector system in it. And I didn't know it had this system. And as I was driving along, I tried to change lanes without, I don't know why that's happening. Sorry, guys. I tried to change lanes without an indicator, and I didn't know, and the steering wheel wouldn't turn. And then I realized that I had to indicate to change lanes. So basically what's happening is, if we think about this as our self-image, what we believe about ourselves at a subconscious level is keeping us in our lanes. If we change the subconscious, that allows us to change lanes. It allows us to do something different. Okay, so it's like an indicator to change lanes. So your cybernetic system for yourself and people you're working with, it's going to protect what they believe about themselves. It's going to protect them from achieving more than what they think they can or what they think they're worth. And it's going to protect them from achieving or doing less than what they think they are worth. So it's a really interesting system, and when you can actually work with it. And then there's the immunity to change. So this is where it's like your own bodyguard. And as I said, it protects you from disappointment. This is the analytical mind kicking in. The analytical mind is going to protect your people when you've got a change coming on. It's going to protect them. So it protects you from looking stupid, and it also protects your values and any self-imposed rules that you have. So these two protective mechanisms are extremely powerful, but when you know about them and when you know how the subconscious mind works, you can actually set them up to work in your favor. You can reprogram the subconscious mind through repetition to believe something different about yourself or about a situation. So as I was saying, with the right instructions, these two systems can help us. So I've used this model for myself to be able to navigate change by preparing my subconscious before the change. So it would naturally take the actions it needed to take. So you can do that, and you can help your teams do that if you wanted to. But on the flip side of that, If you have any ideas or outdated beliefs that don't serve you, that aren't aligned to where you're wanting to go or where you're wanting to take people, anything that comes up, these two protective mechanisms are going to jump on in and save the day. They're going to protect you from moving forward. So they're tools, they're neither good nor bad. They're actually there to help us. So how do we change the program? First of all, we need to use our conscious mind, which is 5%, to decide that we're going to change. So we know that through the stages of change, when we get to the planning and then the action, what sits in between there is a decision. So we need to decide that, yes, I'm going to change. Then using repetition, we need to either replace the non-productive behavior that we have. So if it was one thing that we used to do that we can't do anymore, what's the new thing I'm replacing it with? We need to look at and analyze any obstacles and fears and start to rationalize those so that we start to really understand and start to get a deeper sense of why we're making the change. So again, this comes down to the vision and the plan. We need to change our internal dialogue. So what are we telling ourselves? We need to start to look at the internal. So what's the message that I keep telling myself? Because the more I say things to myself through repetition, if it's a negative thing or something that doesn't serve me, it's going to go straight through into the subconscious and form a belief and form a program that will inevitably end up being your actions. Will turn into actions, and it'll turn into either an immunity to change or a cybernetic system. So we need to ensure that we have beliefs aligned to the goal. So are we in alignment? Does the conscious mind, the idea of the goal, is that aligned to the subconscious program that I already have running? And most of the time when we're talking about change, anything that's different, it's not aligned. So we start to change that through repetition. And then we start to look at how can we activate some of the supporting traits. So supporting traits might be courage, confidence, starting to look at our self-image and is it aligned to where we want to go. We do that for ourselves personally, and then we can coach and lead other people to do the same thing. If you're up for another story, I'll share another story of how I personally overcame the subconscious. So one of the changes that happened in my life was leaving the corporate world and starting my own business. And that happened about 7.5 years ago. So when I first left, I realized that I wasn't taking the actions that I thought I should be taking as a business owner. And because I understood this work, I sat back and thought, well, why aren't I taking those actions? What beliefs do I have? Because obviously my actions are driven by my subconscious mind, and I'm not doing the things I consciously know I need to do. So something in the subconscious mind needs to change. What I was doing, I was taking 22 years of being an employee, having to run my thoughts and decisions through other people to get them done. I was senior manager as well, but there was always someone else that had to sign off. And here I was running a business where I now got to make the decisions, but I wasn't. Because I had this program that someone else had to give me permission to take action. So what I did is I sat down and I analyzed it. I'm going from an employee to a business owner. That requires a different set of beliefs, and it requires a different set of actions. So how do I replace employee with business owner in the subconscious? I sat down and I thought to myself, what do I want for my business? And what do I need to plant into the subconscious mind to make me take those actions? Because I'm going to change. I have to change. And there's a lot of uncertainty as well. So what I did is I wrote out a script. I started taking all the traits I knew I had that were buried that I hadn't used for 22 years. And I started highlighting those and talking to myself about how I was utilizing them. And I started to write I'm going to say the word self-author a script for my business. And I'm going to just really, I'm not going to give you the whole script, but there was things in there like, I'm really happy emotion. I'm really happy and grateful that I'm flying around the world, teaching my programs to corporate organizations. I'm confident, I'm a good speaker, I'm blah, 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 blah. Okay. I didn't just write that out once because I know that the subconscious mind changes two ways: emotional impact, repetition. So I thought, I'm going to have to repeatedly tell myself this until I truly believe it at a subconscious level. So every day for 3 to 4 months, I got up and the first thing I did every day was write this new script out. And every time I wrote it, I got emotionally involved with this new version of myself. I then got tired of writing it. So I got my iPhone and I recorded myself with a really confident voice as if it had already all happened. Because remember, the subconscious mind thinks in present tense. It doesn't operate in the future. So what I then did was recreate a new version of me, and I put it onto my iPhone in my voice and I played it every morning. And because I know when the brain is in certain brain waves and I know what brain wave is more suggestible, I knew I needed to be in theta brainwave for it to just take it through osmosis. And I knew that theta occurs naturally twice a day, once when you first wake up and once just before you fall asleep. So every morning I'd roll over, my alarm would go off. Instead of getting out of bed, I'd get my phone, press play on that recording, put it under my pillow and listen to it and get emotionally involved with it. 12 months later, my business was completely different. I went from teaching 1 or 2 things every now and then in Melbourne to flying business class around the world, teaching my programs in huge organizations in Dubai, London, Hong Kong, Singapore, India, London. I think I said London. And things started to change because I was taking different actions. I was now acting from a business owner. So for you personally, leading people through change, if you're somebody who's not communicating yet, somebody who doesn't have a vision, who doesn't know how to connect emotionally with your people, don't worry about the how just yet. Start becoming the person who does those things. Then notice how, and through repetition, you'll start to naturally find the ways to do it. But we've got to change the program as the manager, as the leader. Or for those of you who are individuals, start aligning that vision you have, that goal of where you want to go, with something at the subconscious. Create an identity matched to that vision. That's how you manage change and uncertainty at a deep and foundational level. You won't get this teaching in a lot of change management courses, I'm sorry, because what I'm doing here is bringing together a lot of the psychology and neuroscience and all the things that are more than just business principles. This is how we operate as humans. Get it right for yourself and you can help others through it. Let's have a discussion around what will you personally do to help yourself and anyone you lead to overcome these 2 systems, to help them overcome the cybernetic system, which is their self-image, or help them overcome their immunity to change, which is, I'm scared to look stupid.
I think create an environment where failure is actually encouraged and rewarded. Make it so that it's not such a scary concept, so that people will take risks, people will try, even though they're afraid to. And then obviously give constructive criticism instead of making it about what the failure was, gear it towards what the learnings are.
Yeah, I love that. And here's a little tip for you if you're open to a tip. Because what you're saying there is absolutely powerful and pivotal. And one of the things, instead of using the words encouraging people to take risks and make mistakes, you could just flip that the way that you describe that as encouraging people to experiment, to become a scientist of their life or the change, which means, so if we look at it that way, an experiment is, well, if I'm experimenting, I don't know if it's going to be right or wrong. And if it's wrong from an experimental point of view, it gives me information to move forward. And then they're thinking, I'm not taking a risk, I'm just experimenting. And that opens up and gives them more permission. So if you can change your language around risk and mistakes to experimentation, now people will probably automatically start to feel a little bit more comfortable in experimenting with it. And then you come back. So when we experiment, we come back, we get the information, and then we make another decision on where to go next. That's making mistakes.
You actually answered my question again. That's how I actually manage people who have mindsets, give them opportunity for them to go out and experiment themselves and come back and give feedbacks, be part of it. So in that way, they are not forced to something, but they're given an opportunity to go out and see the changes for themselves and experiment themselves and see, oh, this is going to work for me or this is not going to work for me. That's the method I always use across all of my team members. So that's the answer you actually given just now. So that's exactly what I always do. And I think that's one of the key factors for me, very helpful to manage the difficult people who have very narrow-minded or mindset people who not willing to change. This is the only method I use.
Yeah, beautiful. And one of the things, just to add to that, that gives validation to what you're doing is that when people are experimenting, you're giving them ownership. And when they have ownership and they're creating, people actually, they care more about the things they're involved in and the things they create. So if they're experimenting and they come up with an idea or a change, they own it, they're more likely going to see it through.
Georgia, can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like, this has been excellent and you're fantastic. How does meditation come into play with all this mindset and this, you know, because you hear this is actually amazing what you're saying and it's fantastic. I haven't heard it in that concept. But, you know, people say, you know, meditation's good for the mind, it keeps you focused. You know, what's your take on that? Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so you can use meditation for different things. So a lot of what we're hearing at the moment around meditation is good for, and we're using the term mindfulness, which is just being mindful of what's going on in your mind. Okay, you can use meditation in a constructive way. So if you think about what I did around my creating that blueprint and that script, I was then in a meditative state in the morning, programming myself. So I was using it for creation. So another way of looking at the same type of work as meditation, you could call it mental rehearsal, which athletes do. A lot of people do this work. They mentally rehearse the vision of what they want at the end before it happens, and they're starting to now plant the seeds and create the neural networks within the body before the event. So you can use meditation for that. And yes, you can use meditation to increase focus. Focus is what I use the term will. And the higher level you have of focus, which is a mental muscle, the stronger your focus is, the stronger you can stay aligned to your goal and your vision.
Oh, wow.
So meditation's used for so many different ways, and it's a really powerful tool when you understand the different ways you can use it.
Also, the other thing is, how about pictures and images, having, you know, things around you that you want yourself to be, or, you know, to have reminders? Does that help too?
So I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
The advertising industry, do they use pictures?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, because they understand that the mind, we think in pictures.
Yes.
So if I was to ask you to, I don't know, think of an elephant, right? Yeah. You get a picture of an elephant, whatever that looks like for you. You automatically, the screen of your mind, an elephant comes up. The brain's going through looking for the file of elephant picture.
Yes.
I can tell you right now, you did not get the word or the letters ELEPHANT.
No, I got the vision.
You got the vision.
Yeah.
So we're visual beings. So the idea is that if you can subliminally put images around of the future state, it does help. Absolutely.
It does. How does that correlate with you doing the script and having the images? You know, like you can do a vision board. How do those? Oh, you can do both.
There's nothing stopping you. That's flooding the subconscious mind through repetition. So the more stimulus, the more you can use your senses, bring in what you want at a subconscious level, the more you're feeding, and the faster your subconscious mind will take it on board.